Hello everyone. In this video I want to talk to you about the economics of migration. You can call it Migration Economics 101. I want to explain some basic facts that a lot of people who don't know shit about the economy have some misconceptions about. There's a lot of problems in economics, particularly that nobody fucking understands it. And nobody misunderstands economics and finance more than people who go very shallowly into it, think they know everything, and just go on to call it astrology. It's not actually. It's mostly bullshit, but it's not astrology. So whenever somebody says that immigrants added so and so many billions to your economy last quarter or this year, there is a lot of bullshit behind that statement, and there's a lot of garbage, and it doesn't actually mean as much as you might think. Here's a clip by the Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs. It's going to be in Polish, but you have the subtitles, and I want you to listen to what he's telling you. And later we're going to debunk that, and I'm also going to cover some problems with migration and why our methodology, and especially what is pitched to the public, is utter garbage.
W 2024 roku nasze PKB powiększyło się dzięki nim o niemal 100 miliardów złotych. To ponad połowa kwoty przeznaczonej w tym samym roku na Narodowy Fundusz Zdrowia.
And I already like what he did there. So the guy is going to give you some random number, and to make it sink in better, he's going to make a comparison like, hey, they've added this and this much to our economy, but you don't know what the fuck that means. So here's a comparison. We spent twice as much on health service. So your instant association is, I guess that's pretty good, right? Because they're almost paying our social service. No, actually, that's not how it fucking works. And that's the best part, but we'll get to it.
Ogromna większość ukraińskich uchodźców pracuje lub prowadzi działalność gospodarczą. Poziom aktywności zawodowej dorosłych imigrantów z Ukrainy jest wręcz wyższy niż wśród Polaków.
That's another great thing. So apparently, work activity among migrants from Ukraine is higher than among Polish people. So wait a second, what does that mean? Well, I guess some fucking Polish people can't work because maybe they can't afford to live under the wages that Ukrainians are able to work under. That's pretty fucking interesting, isn't it? So apparently you have a country which supposedly should prioritize Polish people because it's Poland and people supposedly speak Polish, right? But for some reason, Polish people work less than Ukrainians. Maybe it's because they're fucking lazy and they're pieces of shit and Poland should be turned into India, but I don't happen to believe so. Maybe it's actually because Ukrainians are able to work for lower wages. Maybe it's because if you send 1/3 of your garbage wage from Poland to Ukraine, you can sustain a family of 4 off of that. That's fascinating.
Od 2022 roku Ukraińcy założyli w Polsce ponad 120 000 firm.
And that's also a great piece of news right there. Ukrainians founded 120,000 companies in Poland. And it doesn't matter how many of those companies are fucking shell companies that are used to steal money from the budget. It doesn't matter how many of those are employing a single person and they're not actually doing anything. It doesn't matter how many of them failed and went into garbage. It doesn't matter how many of those companies are literally consultancy services for naturalizing migrants. Because if you Google naturalization services in Poland, search it on Instagram, on Facebook, you will get thousands of ads of companies run by Ukrainians that focus on bringing their own people and Pujits and Arabs into Poland. This is hilarious.
Zatrudniają ludzi, płacą podatki. Tu, u nas. Te przedsiębiorstwa od lat zwiększają naszą wymianę handlową z Ukrainą, a w czasach pokoju ich rola jeszcze wzrośnie. Ale przecież nie o zysk finansowy przede wszystkim chodzi. Od 4 lat pokazujemy światu, co oznacza hasło Polska Solidarność.
So for 4 years, we've been showing what Polish solidarity means. And apparently, Polish solidarity means being replaced in your own country. It means being undercut by immigrants who are willing and able to work for lower wages. Apparently, it means being treated by your own government as a piece of shit. And taking it and being a good little guy. That's what Polish solidarity means. So let's get started. GDP, gross domestic product, is the value of all goods and services produced in an economy. What the fuck does that mean? Well, that's a good question, and this is where it gets more philosophical. Basically, here's a formula for GDP. You add up consumption, you add up investments, governmental expenditures, very important, add up exports, and subtract imports to an economy. And this kind of gives you the size of the economy. But it's important that this is noted in nominal terms, such as US dollars or Polish zlotys. Now, if you have an inflation, there's a difference between nominal GDP and real GDP. You can have a scenario where GDP grows nominally, but really nothing changed. Just because GDP goes up, doesn't really mean shit. There's been tons of countries, like the USSR, where GDP was growing until the entire fucking country collapsed. And it's no secret that just because GDP was growing in the USSR, it was a pretty shitty country to live in. Now, GDP is growing in Venezuela, it's growing in Iraq, and it's growing in North Korea. You want to live there? Fuck no. GDP can be growing for thousands of different reasons. But for example, if you increase government spending, GDP is gonna go up. And you can increase governmental spending by taking on debt. So say, when you take on debt to build a new shiny airport that nobody fucking asked for, like CPK in Poland, which is a huge topic right now, and you start taking money out to pay companies that are going to pretend they're doing something while they're getting rich off of the back of Polish people, GDP is going to be going up. So this really doesn't matter that GDP is going up. Now, what happens when you add 3 million people, like we did, into an economy, and they all kind of get spawned into very similar locations? So this is Poland. Nobody from those Ukrainians, fantastic people, but this is more just about immigration in general. It's not only about Ukrainians. This can be applied to a lot of countries and to a lot of people, but I'll be focusing on Ukrainians in Poland. They are not going to go to Godab. They're not going to go to Białogród, to Zakopane. They're not going to get evenly distributed among the huge country. Now, this is 10% of our population almost, and they will be focused in big cities like Gdańsk, Warszawa, Kraków, Wrocław. In Wrocław, fun fact, 50% of the people are Ukrainian now. 50% are Ukrainian. Now, if you don't think there's a problem with that, well, this is the wrong channel for you to be in. What happens when those people come here? Well, they have their needs. So, for example, here's Ivan, and Ivan needs a haircut. And this is a big thing that happens in Poland, but it's also happened before. It's not a big shock to anybody that Ivan, when he has a choice whether to go to a Polish hairdresser, he's going to have to speak Polish and explain shit. That's not convenient. We're not going to do that. He's going to go to a Ukrainian hairdresser, which conveniently also came to Poland, also doesn't fucking speak Polish, but they both speak Ukrainian or Russian, because most of those people don't actually speak Ukrainian because it's a fake country with a fake language and a fake history. So they're going to be speaking Russian together, and he's going to get a haircut for 20 zloty from Aunt Halina, or Galina, or whatever, who is a 50-year-old lady who conveniently also came to Poland, and now she can spend her 20 bucks, 20 zloty, paying her realtor, who so happens to be the son of a Ukrainian oligarch, who just bought a couple buildings in Warsaw, and now he's renting them out to his fellow countrymen. So this is an important thing. Whenever somebody like this retard Sikorski, the minister, says that they opened companies and they're creating an economy, it's important to ask who's benefiting from that economy. Because I know a lot of Ukrainians, and I know that when they need something, they tend to seek around their own. And it's no big shocker. If you were in a foreign country and you had to get something done, you would probably try to find out somebody who speaks your own language. Because that makes fucking sense. Especially if it's easy, especially if there so happens to be 3 million other people like you on a small location, in a small area like Warsaw, and hey, they also need a haircut. They also need groceries. They also need a photo shoot. They also need new documents, law help, translations. They are creating their own economy. And here is how it affects normal people. So here is Paweł. Paweł was born and raised in Gdańsk. Paweł is 35. Now, Paweł was never the brightest shine on the sky. He was never the brightest guy in his class. But he figured, hey, there'll always be demand. This is a light bulb, by the way. Forget it. He had an idea, and the idea was that there's always going to be demand for construction. So that's what he started doing. And he's been working at the same construction site, well, not the same construction site, but the same company for a long time, and he's making around the minimum wage, which is 30 zloty an hour. And he wants to stay in the country he's been living in forever. He wants to stay in the same city. He would like not to be forced to leave the country where he was born, not to leave the city where he was born, so he has to rent an apartment. This is an apartment building inside our apartments. And what happens to a cost of rent when you suddenly add 10% of a population to a city? So say in Warsaw you had 300,000 apartments and rent was 1.5K, and now the population grows 10%. Well, there's still 300,000 apartments, but now rent is 1,650. That's growth. That's expensive. That's not cool. Pavel's not going to be happy about that. Can he afford that? Well, that's just the beginning of his problems. Now, in a normal country, you can build apartments. But in Poland, it's not that difficult because we have this beautiful thing called the European Union. Glory to the EU, eh? Euro strong together, Euro fucking poors. Now, Germany pushed for climate regulations, something called Dyrektywa Budunkowa, the housing legislature, which regulates even further the highly regulated developmental market, real estate market in Poland. So, for example, every single new house in Poland has to have triple glass windows. Why? Nobody fucking knows. But it does. Guess how much that elevated the prices of windows? Well, fucking a lot. And guess who's gonna incur those prices? Well, people who rent or buy those apartments. Shocker. So not only is it now more expensive to rent, there's also fewer companies building new apartments. Because it's expensive, because there is less demand, because it's expensive. Not only is it more expensive to produce those houses, to build them, but it's also more expensive to rent them, and fewer people can afford that. Okay, so where are we now? Our guy, Paweł, has always worked the same job and has always lived in the same apartment, and he's renting it, and the apartment is now more expensive. That makes him unhappy. Well, Paweł can't really fucking do anything about it, can he? Because he's got this girlfriend, her name is Julia, and they want to start spawning mini characters into the game. Mini Pawels and mini Julias. Now, for that reason, Paweł goes up to the manager of the construction site. This is a manager, this is a hat he's wearing, this is his face. He's unhappy because he hasn't had his morning vodka yet. And Paweł is telling him that, hey, I've been always working for 30 zloty an hour. Now I would love to get 32. You know me, I work hard. I'm loyal. I've been here for years. And I would really, do a lot for those additional 50 cents because that's how much 22 zloty are. And it would actually allow me to have a kid. And, with prices going up, that sucks for me. And it's hitting me a lot into my pocket. And this guy, it doesn't really matter whether he cares about Pavel or not. Maybe he does and he's going to give him the raise or not. But he's got instructions from upside of the company. And they tell him, hey, we just got in touch with this migration company that's just legalized a container of Indians or Ukrainians in this example. Doesn't really matter. And they all live together. And we are getting 100 Indians at the price of one. What a great deal this is. So now that the supply of workers has doubled and there is no labor shortage, this is important, no labor shortage. What you hear a lot in the media is going to be companies bitching about how there is nobody to work and how they need to import millions of Somalis to take your jobs. If you tried getting a job recently, it's pretty fucking tough to get a job, even a starting position, even if you have something on your CV. Now, Pavel asking for 32 is going to do just one's man's worth of labor, right? Why would you hire Pavel when there is two Ukrainians, Ivan and Dmitro? Their combined IQ is 50, but that doesn't really matter because you don't need high IQ or you don't even need to speak Polish for that matter to move bricks. And they agree to work for 20 zloty an hour. And they will provide 2 equivalents of labor for every Pavel. Now, if you look at this from a higher perspective, from a high-level nerd economical perspective, what are you going to see? Well, the economy just added 2 new jobs. So actually, hey, the economy doubled in size if you're looking at job openings. And not only, instead of hiring Pavel for 32 zloty, you now hire 2 guys for 40 zloty, so the GDP grew by 8 zloty, so it grew by 25%. That's a 25% revenue growth. That's a 25% GDP growth. That's fantastic. 2 new jobs and 25% GDP growth, and you're telling me all I had to do was to get that was to send some Polish guy into financial ruin and he's probably going to kill himself? Now that's a damn good deal. And you might ask yourself, hold up, well, how is it possible? Well, it's possible because Ivan and Dmitro know that they're not going to be staying in Poland forever. They know that their situation is tough, so they're going to rent a 30-meter apartment together and they're going to split it. Dmitro is going to be sleeping on a couch and Ivan is going to be sleeping on the fucking floor. And they're going to be sharing the rental costs, which is going to decrease their prices of labor, their prices of rent. Now, if you know anything about price levels in Poland versus Ukraine, then you know that you can pretty much sustain a family in Ukraine for a fraction of a wage that you are earning in Poland. So this is a fantastic deal. They share an apartment together. They know the situation is temporary, so they're just fucking chilling. And they are also sustaining a family in Ukraine from this wage. Maybe eventually they're going to bring them over so those guys can also take some jobs up in Poland. But hey, the economy just grew 25%, so what are you bitching about? Sure, maybe Pavel has no fucking job now. Maybe he's crying. Maybe he's already taking his fucking life. Maybe he and his wife, instead of spawning new kids, are going to move back to a house of their parents. But who gives a fuck? The economy grew by 25%. There is 200% job openings growth. And of course, I'm over-exaggerating here. Migration isn't bad. It does grow the economy. The problem is, it doesn't mean what people think it means. You don't want the economy to grow. You want you to have a nice life. You want you to be able to afford houses. So you want to focus on affordability. You want to focus on good healthcare. You want to focus on living in a country where most of people look like you, speak the same language, and don't live in fucking containers, because it's still profitable for them to come here and live like an animal so that they can sustain their family in a foreign country. The result is maybe the economy grew 25%, maybe there is 200% new job opening growth, and maybe these guys are going to grow the economy further. For example, Ivan and Dima are going to get a haircut from Aunt Halina, and she's going to send this money to her realtor, and he's going to buy more apartments in Warsaw to rent back to Indians, who can now come and increase Poland's GDP even further. That's even more economical growth. Hey, that's fantastic. Let's do that. No. How about we don't do that? So really, what happens when you hear that Ukrainians added 2.7% to the Polish GDP, what this really means is that Ukrainians supplied tasks, services, products worth 2.7% of the previous Polish GDP, and those tasks were not, those services, those products were not made by Polish people. So effectively, 2.7% was taken from Polish people and given to Ukrainians. This is what the minister said in his speech. More migrants are working, percentage-wise, per capita, than Polish people. Why is that? Well, because they fucking live in cages. There is literally houses, small apartments in Warsaw, at the outskirts of Warsaw, that house 8 Tajiks or 8 Uzbeks. In a cramped apartment of 50 meters, there's 8 people, they share rooms, and they work on construction sites. Because it still pays. Because if you send $100 to Uzbekistan, it's gonna be fucking a lot of money to feed your family. And eventually, this is gonna fucking blow up. And Pavel is gonna be jerking off at 40 years old in his house with his parents. His wife left him for some probably nigger in Africa. And this piece of shit, Radosław Sikorski, is gonna come out and he's gonna tell you that, hey, the GDP grew. What are you bitching about? Just work harder, bro. Well, maybe instead of working harder, we should actually focus on deporting competition. Thank you for your attention.